Morning, everybody. Great to be with you, and especially good to be with you. How about last week, just Pastor Derek crushing it and delivering the goods to us just around this middle of Psalm 3 and a unique message to men. And so I hope you just absorbed that for all it was worth. And let me just ask us a little question today, one that is going to very easily, remarkably easily, just put us all in the same campground here this morning, okay? And that is very simply this. Just go ahead, hands in the air. If you have any amount, no matter how big or how small, any amount of stress in your life. And any amount of stress in your life. Okay, now listen, just keep your hands up for a second. If you're not raising your hand, you are somebody else's stress because you're a liar. Okay, stress, it is a part of life, no matter how big or how small. And it could be really small to you, and you could be one of those people who even under pressure, your heart rate doesn't really go up at all. You're just this steady 54 beats a minute, whatever it is, right? That could be you, but there's still this element of stress in life. I mean, babies are stressed, right? They're stressed when they can't eat. They're stressed when they have a dirty diaper. They're stressed when somebody else wants them to sleep, when they don't want to sleep, and then they get older, and they're stressed when another kid has the toy that they want, right? And then they're stressed when mom and dad are trying to guide them in a certain direction. Mom and dad are stressed by trying to get a kid to sleep or whatever. School can be stressful, right? And you go and there's even in kindergarten, there's social pressure and there's, what are we doing? And maybe lots of us don't remember that, but that was real, right? Or maybe you're 10 and you're stressed out about your team or will your team win, or you're stressed out thinking about maybe the next tournament, or just the desire you have to perform well, right? And it actually maybe feels like, okay, that's a good desire, and it is, but it comes with a little bit of stress. Nothing wrong with that, right? But it's just this reality, and some of us are stressed about trying to find a new job or get a job, and we keep getting emails back that the company or the team or the place we applied to isn't interested in hiring us, and that creates this unique set of stress. There's even a little bit of stress for those of us in West Michigan with, I want to capture summer for all it's worth, right? It's so short and it's so fleeting. How am I going to capture all of it and just grab all of it for all that it's worth, right? And then there becomes stress in jobs. There's maybe a little bit of pressure in how we manage the money. There's pressure in what we do in an economy that's clearly uncertain, like ours right now. There's just, it's not too hard to just be honest and say that on some level, stress, it's a part of life. It's sometimes minor, sometimes huge. Well, this morning, I want to give you an invitation to one of the greatest gifts there is around stress. And I want to tell you at the very beginning this morning that most of us have never thought of it this way. We've never been taught to think of it this way. And honestly, much of the world around us doesn't want us to think about it this way. But in order to see this gift, I want to invite you one last time, Psalm 3. It's where we've been for the last few weeks. Pastor Derek helped us through the middle of that last week, Psalm chapter 3. We've been looking at this guy named David who's been lamenting and just sitting in the middle of his own loss and his own family stress and dysfunction in the moment, some of his own decisions, some of the decisions of people around him. He's been navigating all of that, and he's been kind of saying, okay, but here's God. I'm going to insist that my soul remember some things. And just to get us moving, I want to go back and just read those handful of sentences. Again, this whole psalm is only 12 sentences. Just go back and read those handful of sentences where we've been. Just set the stage a little bit. Psalm 3, this is what David, in his lamenting and in his stress-packed situation, this is what David wrote. Lord, how many are my foes? How many rise up against me? Many are saying of me, God will not deliver him. That's his lament. There's this passionate grief and sorrow going on in David's life. But you, Lord, I'm going to insist in my soul that you, Lord, you are a shield around me that completely surrounds me. You are the glory that grounds me, the one who actually lifts my head and establishes and reestablishes my worth and significance. And so I call out to you, and you answer me. That's the beginning of this psalm. So David's in all this pressure, he's in all this lamenting, he's in all this grief, all sorts of stress that's been kind of running David's direction. And then look at what David says in verse In verse 5, I love this. It's remarkable to me. Here's what he says. I lie down and I sleep. And I sleep. Like how many of you could just use more sleep? And maybe the question better asked is not how many of us could use more sleep, but how many of us could use better sleep, more productive rest, more recharging sleep. David, in the middle of all of this stress and pressure, is like, hey, I'm just telling you, man, I lie down and sleep. I am lamenting, but I am insisting to my soul that God is still some things. There are things constant about God. So one thing that's going to be constant about me is I'm going to lay down and sleep. I love it. Right in the middle of all his stress, here's David. Yep, I mean, you guys do what you do. I'm going to lie down and sleep. And then he closes it like he just says, next line is this, and I'm actually going to wake up in the morning. I do wake up in the morning because it's actually the Lord that sustains me. I got all this stress. I got all this pressure. David says, it's like, okay, well, I lie down and sleep. Here's the greatest gift, and here's what I want to say to you today that's possible, that most of us have not understood as possible, and most people are not telling us is possible, but we see it in the life of David. Here it is. It's going to sound so simple that it's actually hard to believe. But with Jesus, even in lamenting and even in the stress, you can experience more rest in increasing stress. You can experience, we could experience more rest in increasing stress. Because here's the reality. Listen, you can and we should eliminate some of our stressors. Some of us could lower our stress level. We could eliminate some of the temptations, the addictions, the patterns we have with technology or social media or the pace at which we live. Some of that we've done to ourselves, right? And we could eliminate some of that and we could lower the stress. But what we also understand is that we cannot eliminate all of the stress. We can't eliminate all of the pressure. In fact, sometimes when your life is going well and you are moving forward, you're having great experiences that come with increased responsibility and increased stress. That was David's life over and over again. He goes from overlooked by his brothers to the leader in an army. He goes from threatened by a king to being the king himself. David, he keeps adding like these really amazing opportunities and these really God-ordained responsibilities with incredible potential. But let's be honest, with those comes some added stress and added pressure. And here's a guy in the middle of some of the greatest stress imaginable, being hunted down by one of his own sons to try and kill him because of some family dysfunction. And in the middle of all of that, here's David. Yep. I mean, I am lamenting some things. My heart is grieving. I'm having to insist to my soul that we remember some of what is constant about God. And because of that, I'm going to sleep. Here's a guy, he's painting the picture of himself sleeping well in caves, on the run, hiding out. I will lay down and sleep. And while sleep is obviously somewhat connected to the physical health of our body, right? Our body needs to be healthy and in right physical alignments to sleep well. It's also connected to the condition of our soul. And David, through the example of his life and the power of his connection with God, is inviting us into saying, look, you could have increasing, you could have more stress because sometimes life brings it. And increasing rest. Now again, look, there are some things that we need to eliminate the stress. This is not the invitation to just live completely carelessly and recklessly. David's got some very intentional ways of living. But what it is saying is sometimes you can't eliminate all the stress. You can't get rid of everything. You can't get rid of everything. David can't get rid of everything about what he's in. He can't say, but I'm going to have more rest, even in increasing stress. Because in increasing stress, I actually need more rest. Because stress, good stress, bad stress, doesn't matter. Good stress and bad stress can take the same toll on the body, right? And so both require more rest. I want to tell you, I know it's hard to believe, I know it's hard to comprehend, but you can have more rest in increasing stress. Not careless, not unwise, not ridiculous, unnecessary stress, but some of the stress that comes with life. Some of the stress that comes with pain and loss, like David's in, and some of the stress that comes with good and new responsibility and new opportunity. Furthering of your dream, furthering of the mission of the story of God in your life. Both of those are happening in David. And in the middle of it, he says, I just lay down and sleep. I'm laying down to sleep. And I get up in the morning because God sustained me. So how does that happen? How does David actually experience that? Let's look at it. Because I want you to experience this. Let's go on to the next verse. Verse 6, we'll look at verse 6 and 7 here for a minute. He says, I'm not going to fear, though what's actually true is that tens of thousands assail me on every side. What I'm going to pray is, hey, arise, God, deliver me, my God. Strike all my enemies on the jaw and break the teeth of the wicked. You can see David's got some anger in him too, right? He's like, come on, I'm done with this. And it maybe not be literally in every moment, tens of thousands on every side, tens of thousands of physical people on every side. Many times in David's life that was true. But oftentimes it's people and it's thoughts. David's own son, again, is chasing him down, attempting to kill him, in part because of some of David's mistakes that he made. And so you can imagine the flurry, more like the blizzard of thoughts that are running through David's mind about his own failure, about his own son out to get him, and the stress that's coming with that. And while you're on the run, where do I find honey in the middle of this field? And where do we kill something in order to eat? And how do I, right? And what? David says, there's tens of thousands. And it's honestly just more than I can count. And so in order to live with more rest and increasing stress, first thing David does, first thing you and I can do is embrace your lack of control. Just embrace your lack of control. David can't control Absalom in this one. David can't control what he did or didn't do in the past, how he could have handled this differently. He can go offer forgiveness. He can go offer and try and make some relationships right. But he can't control what he did in the past. He can't control how people are responding. It's completely out of his control. And that's part of this statement. It's just like tens of thousands, God, from every corner, everywhere I look. They're just like chasing me down. It's thoughts, it's people, it's obstacles. Other points in David's life, it's opportunities, it's decisions, it's options in front of him of which one do we pick and how do we go and how might God be leading, and all of these people are counting on me, and what do I do with that? It's in good stress and in bad stress that David finds himself saying, it's just tens of thousands, which is really David saying, hey, just embrace your lack of control. And we all know this at the end of the day, right? There are very few things that we actually control. There are very few things in your life you actually have ultimate control over. Parents, we don't really have ultimate control over our kids. Kids, you don't really have control over your parents. Teachers, you don't really have ultimate control over your students and what they do outside of a classroom and what they make decisions in the rest of their life. Students, no matter how hard you work and how perfect you might do things, you don't have ultimate control of how your teacher views you, grades you. Right? There's very few things that we have ultimate control over. And we never have ultimate control over somebody else. No matter what David does, he's never going to have ultimate control over somebody else. So here's the thing. What we do have control over is our ability to embrace our lack of control. And sometimes embracing the lack of control in the middle of stress, middle of pressure, even in the middle of lamenting and grief, sometimes the embracing the lack of control brings incredible relief. This past winter, downhill skied for the first time. And we were in Colorado with some friends. And it's the first time ever, right? And I'm probably too old for the first time, but I'm like, it doesn't matter. I'm going for this thing. This is what we're doing. I'm in, right? It's not going to limit me, right? And so here we go. More times than not, I found myself completely out of control going down a hill. It just was. Right, more times than not, right? I mean, I've played a lot of sports. I guess I still have relatively good coordination things, right? But I'd never downhill skied, like we're going to the steepest environment. Right? I'm like, more times than not, I'm completely out of control. But the instinct is to fight for the control. Everything in me, every little muscle and tissue and fiber and joint in my body is all working together to try and gain control, keep control as long as I possibly can. No matter how crazy I look, I'm going to fight for control. And inevitably there would come this moment where I realized the safest option for me is to acknowledge that I actually have no control and just completely let myself wipe out. Just completely go all out down and slide down the rest of the hill until somewhere I stopped. To just let myself go, right? Even if that meant I had to very humbly and embarrassingly do that in front of a 4-year-old that looked like they could ski better than I could walk. Completely humbling and embarrassing. But sometimes the best thing to do, the greatest relief wasn't just, I actually don't really have any control of what's happening right now. Down we go. Right? Sometimes that's life in the middle of stress and pressure, right? Sometimes the best option is just to say, I don't really have any control. Today, if you want to get some more rest and increasing stress, just go ahead and acknowledge all the things you don't actually have control over. That's David. I can't control these people. I can't control Absalom. I'm not even sure if I can control the few guys that are with me. I'm not always going to be able to control where I find food in the wilderness. I'm not always going to be able to control which animal. I just can't. But I can lie down and sleep because he's got more rest and increasing stress. Look at the next line. So good. Verse 8. This is how he starts to bring this thing to a close. He says, from the Lord comes deliverance. From the Lord comes deliverance. May your blessing be on your people. Hey, church, just say this out loud with me. Say this word, deliverance. Here we go. Let's say it. Deliverance. Just say it again with me. Deliverance. That word that David writes in this song and in this journal entry means victory. It means really an experience of overcoming something. It paints this picture of good coming out of rubble, emerging out of something very broken. And part of what allows David, part of what can allow you and I to experience more rest and increasing stress is absolutely to embrace what we can't control, but then also to believe you can grow. To believe you can grow. David, because of his confidence in God, is saying, look, okay, God, deliverance. You actually are the one who gives deliverance. You're the one who actually brings the victory. There's all these things I can't control, but you got some things, God. And I've seen you enough, God, to know that even when it's awful, you bring good. You can do something good. It's part of what is allowing him to lie down and sleep is this belief that because of God, David can grow through this mess. Through this stress, good stress, bad stress. To believe you can grow through it. David had multiple points in his life that today would easily be qualified and acknowledged as traumatic stress. Again, David was completely overlooked by his dad in a pivotal moment in his family and in his nation. David was verbally and emotionally disregarded, and you could even make case to say abused by his brothers. When David was trying to serve a king by the name of Saul, Saul threw spears at him to try and kill him. David has moments where he makes incredibly terrible decisions, catastrophic sin that leads to stress in his life, and really some traumatic stress, to deep loss, to deep setback and woundedness. Because that's the part of the trick of sin, right, is that it promises relief but creates stress. David had really traumatic stress, life on the line, life hanging in the balance, other people's lives in some ways destroyed because of some of his actions, the pressure of leading a nation and leading a people through war and obstacle and through good and trying to keep them just kind of on a good path. David really knew stress, and in some cases, traumatic stress. And PTSD is a very real thing. The weight and the consequences that can come after traumatic stress, like David experienced at some points in his life, it is incredibly real. You can never minimize it. Why would? It's a real thing. You don't want to disregard it and ignore it. It's a real thing. But I want to invite you into something else that's real today. And that is what psychologists and psychiatrists, people in the mental health industry call PTSG, post-traumatic stress growth. And a really high number of people often experience post-traumatic stress growth, where components in their life, sometimes it's their perspective, sometimes it's their relationship, sometimes it's a level of trust, sometimes it's an ease, sometimes it's the launching of something that actually helps and ministers to and serves people that have been through what caused their PTSD originally, right? They launch something and they find this good emerging in them. It's part of what David is getting at. It's part of why David can have more rest and increasing stress. But hear me, listen. There are some that PTSD is this very real and constant thing. And again, it's not to be minimized. It's not to be overlooked. The pain is real. The trauma is real. The loss is real. But often what we fail to understand and see, and often what we have failed to be told, is that for many, PTSD is a possibility. It's a possibility. There are some common ingredients for studies that have been done. There are some common ingredients. I just want to give you two of them. The first one is to be curious. It's to be really curious about your pain. Our emotional pain, the mental pain, and all of the feelings and emotions that come with that, to be very curious about the depth of the loss and the weight of the loss, the significance of it. Again, the road towards PTSD is not to diminish. It's not to diminish pain. People who experience PTSD do not live in some weird sense of denial. They've actually been very curious and exploring and understanding and sitting in the pain and the trauma. It's not people who have denied it and brushed off and acted like that. That's not true. That's not true healing. But it is a permission invitation to be curious. And you could go less than traumatic stress, even just in smaller, more daily stresses of life that are not traumatic. Be curious about them. What happens to you in that stressful situation? How do you navigate that? Why does it even come? What does it feel like? What does it mean? What does it reveal, if anything, about you, the world, people around? Be curious. Be curious. Not denying, not ignoring. Be curious. The second thing is to be in community. over and over and over and over and over again in every study that relates to this possibility for some of PTSG, community is invaluable. It's to be with a group of people who also believe you can grow, who also believe they can grow in their own stress, even if their stress isn't as traumatic as maybe your stress had been. But it's a community of people who believe you can grow. Now, listen, I want to say this very carefully. Please hear me. Give my heart the benefit of the doubt if I don't get these words perfect, okay? Because this is a very tender topic for us. But I really do want you to have the gift of more rest and increasing stress. Even if today you're in PTSD, even if that's something you live with, maybe you've lived with it for years. I still believe that even for you, in that you could have more rest, increasing stress. But here's the thing. When we talk about being a community, let's be wise and careful not to only find ourselves in community with people who are seemingly infatuated with the topic of healing and the idea of working on it. You can get so addicted to the work of healing that you actually crave the dysfunction so you can work on the healing. That's not a pathway to real healing. Let's be in community with people who are curious, who are open and curious to the pain we experience, the stress we experience, bad stress and good stress. Let's be in community with people who will have the full conversation about what that means to us mentally and emotionally and physically and relationally. But let's be in community with people who believe that we can grow, who believe that God could still somehow bring victory. David said, man, I'm lying down to sleep. And part of how I'm lying down to sleep is I just embrace what I can't control, which is a lot of things. I just brace that I'm out of control on those things. And because of the redemptive nature and the loving nature, God, I believe I can grow. God will not let this be wasted. It doesn't mean all my pain's going to go away forever. It doesn't mean I won't still carry some level of grief from the loss I've experienced. It doesn't mean I won't still experience some of the stress of this added responsibility in my life. It doesn't mean all of that. What it actually means is that when my stress or my pressure keeps increasing for whatever combinations of reasons, if I believe that I can grow in it, I actually will increase in rest. Listen, one of the things that helps us rest most is anticipated growth. See, because when we don't have anticipated growth, we feel very stuck and we feel very caught. We feel trapped in the current condition, which for many of us, when we get trapped in the current condition, we do things like sleep more and experience less rest. Part of the gift of David in this moment is he's like, okay, look, God can deliver me. God can change me. I can work with God and we can experience change. There's a guy who said this. I want to give you this quote just as a little bit of a picture. There's a guy who said this. He said, when we are no longer able to change a situation, that's David in many ways here. There's some parts that he can change, but in many ways he can't change the situation. When we are no longer able to change the situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. Not can feel like what? Come on. The guy who said that, his name is Viktor Frankl. Viktor Frankl was an Austrian psychologist, and he survived the Holocaust. He was actually in 4 German concentration camps, including Auschwitz, which was probably the worst, often referred to as things like the extermination camp. Viktor Frankl lived through the Holocaust. And somewhere along the way, Viktor Frankl comes to this realization, I can't control all of this. I can't by myself overthrow Hitler in this regime. But I will receive the challenge to be curious about what's happening in me and to try and create community even in the midst of this, even in the midst of these concentration camps. Or just maybe I'm around some other but we could grow. Maybe I could help convince some people we could grow. Had some incredible writing coming out of that experience, which we find statements like that. And part of what David is revealing to us, part of what Viktor Frankl experienced and began to put to words for us, is that there is this dynamic with a guy like David inside of a relationship with a living, hope-filled, compassion-filled God. That our brokenness, stress, and trauma is not wasted. In fact, it can be used and actually shaped into some remarkably beautiful things. There's a type of Japanese pottery, and I do not claim to be a Japanese pottery expert, but there's a type of Japanese pottery, and it's called kintsugi. Kintsugi. And it really is a combination of two words. In the first kint, it means like gold. And the last half of the word, the suji, means joinery. It's like gold joinery or blending. And I wanted to just show you a piece of that pottery. And here's, you can see like the gold lines in it, and sometimes those are silver, and sometimes those are platinum. But really what happens is this: when the pottery breaks, when the pottery accidentally falls to the floor, when the pottery accidentally hits the table wrong, when the pottery breaks, instead of throwing away, instead of sweeping it up in the dustpan and throwing it away, they grab that and they begin to take what is often this gold, again, or silver or platinum powder, and they begin to, it's like this perfect and pure, luxuriant powder. They begin to mold that together. They begin to make that into this substance that can join the broken pieces together. And all of a sudden, you're putting the pottery back together, and you're putting it back together, almost highlighting in some ways the broken parts. Wherever the gold is where the brokenness was. It actually brings out a new beauty. It doesn't become a mark of dysfunction. It doesn't become an identity of failure. It doesn't become what we get labeled as broken. It's like, oh, look at the beautiful redemption of that. Look at the beauty of creation being born out of that brokenness. And when we get added stress, bad stress or good stress, sometimes things start to break, which is why it's so important for us to embrace that so much is out of our control. And to believe that we could grow so we stay curious, right? And we get in community to watch God build even more beautiful expressions of our life with Him. When beauty's being born, when we believe that it could happen, when we believe that it's in motion, even in the pits of despair or lamenting or stress or the unbelievable weight of responsibility and opportunity, when we believe that the good and the gold is being formed and worked in, it's just a little easier to rest. We will not eliminate all the stresses of life, no matter how big or how small, whether it's performing well in a game or in an event or on a team, or the pressure of the job, or the pressure of turning the marriage, or a new season in parenting, or the opportunities of a job, or the health issue we're trying to navigate, regardless of what the stress is. Because of the goodness of God, you could experience the working in of gold in the brokenness and in the fragile parts. And you could live experiencing, we could live together individually and collectively and as families experiencing more rest and increasing stress. Now I want to pray for you, but just before I do, I want to invite you to imagine something with me. Would you imagine with me your life with you doing the work to eliminate some unnecessary stress. Eliminate some things you don't need to carry and you don't need to keep creating. And maybe it is technology time, maybe it's social media time, maybe it's the pace, maybe you need to shrink the pace, whatever it is, right? But could you imagine your life with some increasing rest when times of stress do increase? Could you imagine how much better and healthier that could feel? Could you imagine it just in your circle of influence? Maybe it's your family or your circle of friends, people you're envisioning rooming with at college this year, right? If you said, what if all of us, what if just our 4 or 5 or 6 or 10, what if we could just embrace that most things are out of our control? And what if we could believe we could grow in the middle of the and the pain and the stress and the loss? And what if we, just our little group here, what if we could experience more rest and increasing stress? How would that change the rhythm of our life? How would it change our relationships, the vibrancy? How would it change the condition of our soul? How would it change the people then on the next layer of influence in our life? Imagine if all of us did that. Imagine if our church, imagine if followers of Jesus were marked not by the denial of stress, not by some weird thing that says you never should have stress if you follow Jesus, right? Not by that. Not by the denial of pain and loss and trauma, and not by the denial of any of that, but by the full-on curiosity and acknowledgement of it. What if in the middle of all that, all of us, what if a whole church, what if a whole movement of Jesus followers could live with more rest and increasing stress? Imagine how that would shape and alter our interactions with people who don't know us real well. Imagine how it would alter our interactions with people who do know us and begin to see a more rested, vibrant us, even just a more rested soul, vibrant soul in us. Imagine what it would be like if just in ways we didn't even register, if people in stores and in our workplaces and our neighborhoods began to encounter that kind of us. Where we weren't denying the increasing stress of life or the increasing stress of the world, but we were experiencing more rest in that increasing stress. Imagine the influential impact if all of us did that. I tend to think it's very Jesus-like. Nobody had more increasing stress than Jesus. And he did it. He did it. Didn't deny the pain, didn't deny the losses, didn't deny the trauma, but lived with this calm sense of rest. What if we all did that? I want to invite us to do it. To live with more rest and increasing stress. Let me pray for you on it. Just for me. Would you bow your heads, close your eyes right there in the room. Let me just pray for you on it. Lord Jesus, today, even right now, could we sense your permission and your freedom in this? Holy Spirit, I'm asking literally just for a holy moment that we could just experience this together, that even right now we could sense you giving us the permission to be very honest about our stress, to be very honest about added pressures in our life, to be very honest about our trauma and our loss, but to embrace that we just don't have control over so many things, and to begin to believe that we could grow even through it, that we're not trying to escape something, that we're trying to believe you could help us grow, that you would be our deliverer, the one who would grow us into victory, that you would blend us, that you would put the gold and kind of the cracks and the broken parts of our lives, and that we would just find rest here. God, even in this moment, would you give these people, God, come on, in this moment, would you please give these people, give us just a moment of exhale, a release of some of that stress, an addition of rest, like a multiplication of rest, even in our stress, I pray. God, thank you for your gentleness and your compassion, and at the same time, your strength in it. I pray these things for all of us. Let it be part of what you do to make us contagious and vibrant to the world around us, I pray. In Jesus' name, amen.